All right, pending home sales are out this morning, showing a better than expected 4.3% rise in August. But these days, it seems like one step forward and at least two steps back in the housing recovery. New troubles are now emerging with the whole foreclosure process. I call it chaos. CNBC's Diana Olick is live in Washington with the details. Hello, Diana.
Hi, Larry. See, we're calling it the robo-signing scandal. You got to get with the program. And today, we were talking about title insurers who protect home buyers against ownership disputes. They say they were on the phone all weekend with the big banks, Fannie and Freddie, trying to figure out how to handle foreclosure sales now tainted by the robo-signing scandal at GMAC, JP Morgan, and Bank of America. The fourth largest title insurer, Old Republic, says it will not insure bank-owned or REO sales as of now. Stocks of the top four publicly traded title insurers, Fidelity National, First American, Stewart Information Services, and Old Republic, took a hit Friday over concerns they would incur greater costs if foreclosure sales are challenged. They're now trying to figure out how to move forward, and that will have big ramifications.
We're slowing down the recovery in the housing market, to be perfectly frank, because we have to work through that inventory. There's probably some estimates put it at a 7 million unit overhang in the shadow inventory. That's probably 2 years worth of houses backed up in this system.
And there's more. Bank repossessions accelerated in August, hitting a record 95,000 just for that month. 22% of all home sales in August were foreclosed properties, with investors making up 21% of all buyers. Make no mistake, we do need investors in this recovery, but some are now worried about their rights to REO properties that they've already bought.
Vast majority of these properties were bought in good faith. So buyers of good faith have rights as well. They depended on a court order, a court decision that has the binding force of law.
Okay, so investors should feel all right about it, but it goes on. Late today, we got news that Lender Processing Services, LPS, had halted trading at the end of the day and put out a statement saying that they were concerned about mischaracterizations of the services LPS provides to lenders and services. There have been allegations in the media that they also had robo-signers on board. They say they did not. They had a small subsidiary who did some signing. But again, everyone is getting messed up in this entire mess, and all we know is that it is going to slow down housing recovery. That is the truth, Larry.
This is an incredible story, robo-signers. Diana, hang with me for a minute. We're going to bring in some guests to talk about this chaotic foreclosure process, and is it ultimately going to spell double dip in housing prices? Let's talk to real estate attorney Stephen Miester. He's partner at Miester, Seelig & Fine. And let's go to Shari Olefson, also real estate attorney at Fowler, White & Boggs. Steve Miester, how serious is this?
It's a serious problem, Larry, because what's happened is that, as Diana reported, there have been these signings of affidavits. Now, the affidavits are simply affidavits which say the attached printout of the mortgage account is accurate, the borrower is in default, and we should be allowed to have foreclosure. But because of the massive volume of these affidavits, apparently these affidavits have been signed without the signers actually looking at them and allowing the underlings working under the signers to check off the boxes, so to speak. But
hang on a second. Shari Olefson, let me bring you in. Look, with the shadow inventory glut already rising and expected to rise, and very few people have much confidence about home prices, how long is it going to take to work this through? We're not talking just a few weeks or a few months, are we? This sounds like a long, drawn-out, bureaucratic, robotic process with lawyers, and oh my gosh.
You're exactly right. And, you know, the servicers and the attorneys, law firms that are in the middle of this are saying a couple of weeks to a couple of months. I think it's going to be a lot longer. And actually, the OCC now has a team stationed in 7 of these offices just to make sure compliance happens. So in the meantime, I mean, after these guys have shot themselves in the foot, they've basically shot a hole right through the housing market, because we've got even more uncertainty than before. We now have, like Diana said, title insurance companies that don't want to write title. If the title insurance companies won't write title, no new lender is going to make a loan on these properties, even if someone wanted to step in and purchase one of them at the risk of a lawsuit, because there's no way that a bank, even if they're found to have liability to a new homeowner to reimburse that money, they're not going to hand over that money. So we've really got a problem with a lot of delay. And the other thing, Larry, that just is incredible here is even more moral hazard, because this is like winning the lottery for a lot of lawyers out there.
For the defaulters. defaulters,
absolutely.
are the big winners.
Yeah, and Larry,
so
they're
we're
just sitting
rewarding
in their
bad
houses.
behavior.
Larry, we already know that the amount of time that it takes to foreclose on a property has grown exponentially over the last several months just because of the glut of these homes. Now you've got all kinds of borrowers that are going to be sitting in their houses rent-free, because bottom line, whether or not some robo-signer signed the document, and I'm not saying there's anything great about that, it is wrong, it's bad process, the bottom line is most of these foreclosures are in fact valid. People were not paying their mortgages, and at some point they are going to get foreclosed on, and they're going to have to move out, and those houses are going to end up on the market. It's just a question of how long we're going to be prolonging the pain.
All right, Steve Miester, this robo-meltdown that everyone is describing, I want to go to a point made in the front page New York Times piece by Gretchen Morgenson about the flaws of securitization, which plays a role in this, Steve Miester. I want to talk about this. I've never liked this model. I think it's got partly responsible for this and a million other things. You've got thousands of pieces assembled. You know what it says in this article? They had multiple banks thought they owned the same property, Steve Miester. Now, give me some robo-legal advice. How does this happen if the securitization of thousands of mortgages and deals is a good thing? I think it's a bad thing.
It's a bad thing, and what's happened, Larry, is these Byzantine securitization structures. You have tons of mortgages being dumped into CDO pools. You have the CDO pools issuing bonds that are secured by the mortgages, and what happens is the securitization bar has, on occasion, gotten sloppy and hasn't tracked through the assignments of the mortgages, and so what happens is you have a clever defendant's lawyer coming in and saying, wait a second, the plaintiff in this foreclosure action doesn't own this mortgage, the assignment wasn't recorded, and there's just sloppiness out there in the securitization process. Larry, there's one other point I want to make.
We're talking Fannie Mae. We're talking Freddie Mac. We're talking private label. We're talking all the big banks, as Diana reported. Look, this thing doesn't just get unwound. We have been securitizing these things for decades.
That's right.
Decades. We are now reaping the rewards of this lousy business model, which also had a lot to do with the credit meltdown. See, what I'm getting at, Shari, is I want to go into this a little more. This is something like the credit equivalent, the housing equivalent of the credit financial meltdown. What you all are describing to me is a meltdown situation. Now, there's no, like, NFL referee to sort this out. This is going to go on forever.
There's no question about that, but the difference here is that we know the money is owed to someone. For example, we have a process when we can't find a borrower in a foreclosure suit.
How do we know that if multiple banks are claiming ownership? Serious question.
We don't know who's entitled to that.
Serious question.
We don't know who's entitled to the money. We don't know who's supposed to get it, but we know it's due. We know it's not being paid. So what we need is a process that coincides with securitization in order to enforce these documents if the time comes. I mean, we have a process now for finding borrowers. A lot of borrowers have just left the state. They're MIA. And we have a process for publishing notice in the paper, filing an affidavit that says we couldn't find them. If we put in place a process like that, along with securitization, the problem is that not knowing who the money is entitled to doesn't mean that the borrower should be able to walk away. We should have a process to be able to collect it and hold it. And
I get that part, but Diana Olick, I got to ask you the next obvious question. Is the government about to step in? Is the government here to help us unsort this?
Well, very interesting you should ask that question, because there were a lot of rumors running around today that the government was going to ask the banks to impose some kind of 90-day foreclosure moratorium, which, by the way, would probably melt down the housing market given how many sales are foreclosures. But I have talked to many people inside government and sources there who say that is not on the agenda, even though every congressman and their brother is calling for it, because, of course, now it's a political issue because they've got their constituents irate about the banks, saying you've got to do something. So you had Congressman Merkley today saying that they wanted to do a foreclosure moratorium and get the banks. But again, I did talk to sources who say for now at least there is no administration plan to call on the banks to do a foreclosure moratorium.
Steve Miester, I'll give you the last word. Lightning round, Steve. What should be done? If you could wave a magic wand, Steve, what should be done?
We should have laws, emergency laws enacted right now that, one, require any borrower who raises this affidavit fiasco to pay interest and real estate taxes current so that we know they're not gaming the system. And we should also enact emergency legislation that says that anyone who buys at a foreclosure sale, that the second mortgage lender who's wiped out and the homeowner can't collaterally attack that foreclosure deed after the foreclosure sale. If we do those two things, Larry, we will curb the damage. The taxpayer, that's being missed here, the taxpayer is going to end up picking up the tab for all these additional lender losses because Fannie and Freddie own half, $5.5 trillion worth of debt, and they FHA insures a ton more mortgages.
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming. Thank you very much, Steve Miester, Shari Olefson, and Diana Olick. I knew that taxpayer part was coming. All right, folks.